what I've done is I've come up with a hypothetical research topic, hopefully something that's kind of relevant to these proceedings. And no, we don't want to restart now. So let's say that as a research topic, we wanted to find scholarly journal articles on the topic of second language learning among university students. Seems pretty relevant, right? So how would we do that? From the library's homepage, which I would suggest to you is probably the best place to begin. I'm a little partial in a manner, but
I concur.
Thank you very much. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to scroll down here to this area where it says resources by subject. Is the font large enough for people in the back to see this?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Okay, great, thank you. And I'm going to click on that link, and it's going to bring up, ultimately here, this nice long alphabetical listing of all of these areas of study that we support here at UB. And I'm going to scroll down to education, because we have these nice research databases that we subscribe to that are just for you, okay? They're not these big, broad, multidisciplinary sources that are going to give you tens of thousands of results. These are targeted sources just for your research. And of course, we have a picture of your friendly neighborhood librarian here as well. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to select this database here called Education Source. Education Source, for those who don't know, is currently the largest let's try that again, the world's largest education database devoted to strictly scholarly material. There are other larger databases, but this is the one I would recommend that you begin with. Now, it is my experience that very often when one gets to this point, they know the words but not the music, right? So they can get here, but then maybe not find exactly what it is that they're looking for, right? So we can enter in some key terms based on what our research topic is here, right? Second language learning, university students. But very often, we might get no results, or too few, or too many, all right? And the reason is this, okay? I'm going to get hypothetical here for a second. Let's say that I was holding up for you a can of Pepsi Cola, all right? Okay? And I asked everyone in the room what I was holding up. Some would say Pepsi. Some might say Coke. Some would say cola, some would say soda, some would say pop.
Tonic.
Tonic, all right. Someone might say breakfast, right? But the point that I'm trying to make here is that we have lots of possible ways of referring to these specific comments that we have in mind. And so what we need in order to find the research materials we're looking for is sort of a controlled vocabulary that brings all of those things together. And the way that we find that controlled vocabulary is to start, instead of typing in random keywords, is to start in this area here called the thesaurus, okay? And all of these steps are on the handout that I sent around. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask the database what I should be using for terms like second language learning, okay? And if you can see, it actually has a suggestion for us. It would prefer for us to use the term second language acquisition. Great. So I'm going to put a check mark next to that box and hit that add button. And now look at what's happening up at the top of the screen here. All right? There are no humans who I am familiar with who would have commenced their search on this research topic by typing in capital D and then in quotes second language acquisition, right? So this is us using that sort of controlled vocabulary. In essence, we are speaking a language that the database understands in order to retrieve the information we're looking for. Okay, so we are halfway there. The next concept that we had in our research topic was university students. Okay, great. So we run our search, and perhaps unsurprisingly, it recommends that we use the term college students instead. Okay, so I'm going to put a check mark in that box, and I'm just about to add it to my search, but before I do, I'm going to call on our library and information science specialist here to tell me how I'm going to connect those two terms.
And
Thank you very much. So, I'm going to add that to my search, and now look at this nice, sophisticated, beautiful search strategy. I can qualify it that way because I'm a librarian, right? And I'm ready to conduct my search, finally. And there's the results that I'm looking for, okay? If you look at those titles, you'll see that they're highly targeted, highly focused on exactly what your research topic is, because you sort of leveraged the power of that controlled vocabulary, okay? Now, there are ways of narrowing the search from here, okay? So 114, that's a lot. In most instances, your professors are going to require that, unless you're doing some kind of historical foundational research, in most instances, your professors are going to want you to use the most currently published research, okay? And in most instances, your professors are going to ask that you find scholarly, refereed, peer-reviewed, academic journal literature. These are all rather synonymous terms, okay?
that understanding what you're going to do, I was asked to talk a little bit about the literature review. Literature reviews are common across all fields. Everybody who's writing a dissertation or getting a graduate degree has to understand what a literature review is, and yet they're very hard. I see a lot of master's students who sort of can't do it, they don't get it, and it's hard to explain what it is. But there are some ways to think about this that will help you get into what is a literature review. And a good literature review will set you firmly in the discipline as a voice in conversation with more senior scholars. So it's really an important psychological step, identity step. So it's a conversation to create new knowledge and discourses. It's not a thesis support or claim evidence kind of activity, right? You're placing yourself in other people's conversations. And I actually think thesis support or claim evidence is relevant to professional writing, professional activity. If my plumber comes and tells me I need 3/4 inch copper pipe, you know, and I say back, that's his claim, I say, okay, I want to use PVC, why can't I? He's going to have evidence for his claim, right? That's sort of an adult move here. But that's different than the epistemic writing. And I want you to try to think about what you're doing. The larger project is question, answer, a problem, or solution. And it's a finding of a question, the finding of a problem, and the working out of what would create a better situation. So literature reviews cluster the scholars that preceded. It's the knowledge that comes before, and there are different formats. I think in eds you tend to just list the name and the dates, right? The clustering is a lot of work that looks facile. It looks really easy when you see that name and dates particular move. But it involves a lot of research, so you get those 114 articles that you start with, and you got down to 50. All right, those 50's got to get clustered. Maybe 10 you can throw away, you know, and maybe only 20 are really important to asking your question or defining your problem. But you're going to have to start clustering them in ways that note their omissions, their flaws, their next step. Oh, I didn't finish italics here, oh well. Or their implications. See, I didn't get to proofreading. But so when you get these 20 articles that you're fussing with, you really are looking for a relevant question or an important problem. And so that's what you're going to be clustering them to do. Say, oh, look at, no, everybody's omitted to talking about this. Or nobody's discussed the implications of this discovery. Nobody's told us what to do next. Now, what this breaks down to is a truism that has been around for decades. And that is, some say X, some say Y. I say Z. And so when I say that writing a good lit review puts you in the discourse, puts you right in there equal to the famous Professor Sum and the famous Professor Sum, and you get to be right there with them, it's a really important, powerful move. It's a way to take authority, that is authorship, author yourself in the academy. And some of it can be done through simply the jargon and discursive patterns of your discipline. So I borrow these templates from a book that is given to undergraduates, they say, I say. And it wouldn't hurt to get a hold of it. They're sort of all over. I don't know what edition it's in. You can get them cheap on Amazon. The library may have them. But I just pulled out a couple for you to make it easy to get a sense of how you're going to place yourself in the literature. Now, this is perhaps moving one step beyond that initial clustering and getting to the sense where you're finding a place for your own voice. And disagreeing is probably the easiest thing to do. My first book was about, the first 3 chapters were all disagreeing. Nah, wrong! You know? And I sort of needed to clear that space to have the authorship to do the next, right? But it was sort of clearing a place with a machete, you know? I got in my way. So, and I gave, these are a couple of, either exact quote or paraphrase. This is plagiarism from Gerald Graff and Kathy Wittgenstein here. But X's claim that something rests upon questionable assumption that something, right? So you just fill that in. It creates a space. By focusing on that, X overlooks the deeper problem of, that sort of move helps you read people critically and begin to cluster them while it's clearing space for you. If you think for a moment, you probably can think of something where, you know, Professor Lyons claimed that, Arabs claim that rests upon the questionable assumption that. I'll make it through my orals or whatever, you know what I mean? But those sort of fill in the blank. Can you fill in the blank for one of these just before we go on? Just to get a sense of how this works.
Sure, I can do one for the second one.
Mm-hmm.
So, kind of in a higher ed context, like by admission standards focusing on GPA and SAT scores, we're overlooking the deeper problem of socioeconomic, environmental factors.
Great.
Good. And it's that easy. Right now I'm writing a paper by focusing on an institution to overlook the deeper problem of the not problem, but the concerns of the students. Whatever. It's pretty easy form to get you thinking. It's a